Most men believe that when God wants to bless a man, he simply opens the door. But that is not how God works. Before God expands a man's life, he tests him, not once, 3 times, because expansion is not just a blessing. Expansion is a weight, and God will never place that weight on a man whose structure cannot carry it. Today I want to show you the 3 tests that appear again and again in Scripture before a man enters expansion. Joseph, David, Solomon. 3 men, 3 expansions, 3 tests. When a building expands, the engineer does not celebrate. He inspects the foundation, because adding floors to a weak building does not make the building impressive. It makes the collapse bigger. When a building is expanded, you do not just add floors. You first inspect the foundation. You test the walls. You examine the structural capacity of every beam and every column. Because adding floors to a weak foundation does not make the building greater. It makes the collapse worse. God understands this law better than any engineer. He is not withholding expansion from you because he does not love you. He is inspecting your structure because he knows what expansion will require of you. And if he expands your life before your structure is ready, he is not doing you a favor. He is handing you a disaster with a bow on it. This is a law, not a feeling, not a concept. A law. Expansion increases responsibility faster than it increases stability. When your business doubles, your problems do not stay the same. They multiply. When your income grows, your decisions do not become easier. They become heavier. When your family grows, your leadership is not reduced. It is demanded at a higher level. This is why so many men collapse at the moment of their greatest opportunity, not because they are weak, but because they were not built for the weight that came with the door opening. And here is the part most men miss. The greatest expansions in Scripture did not begin with blessing. They began with pressure. Joseph, David, Solomon, 3 men, 3 expansions. And before each expansion came a test that almost broke them, not as religious stories, but as structural case studies. Because what these men went through is the same architecture that governs your life today. The first man is Joseph. You know Joseph's story. He had a dream that he would lead, that nations would bow before him, that his life would carry enormous significance. God gave him that vision when he was young, and then God did something that looked like the opposite of expansion. He was thrown into a pit by his own brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was taken to Egypt as property. He served in a house that was not his. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. And there he sat for years. So here is the real question. Was God abandoning Joseph? Or was God building the structure Joseph would need to carry Egypt? Was God abandoning Joseph in that prison? No, God was building Joseph in that prison, because the Joseph who was thrown into the pit as a young man with a dream was not yet built to govern Egypt. He had the vision, but not the structure. He had the potential, but not the proven character. What did God test in that prison? He tested Joseph's identity, not whether Joseph knew his name, but whether Joseph knew who he was when everything around him said he was nothing. Can you keep your sense of self when your circumstances are stripping everything away? Can you stay rooted in purpose when the environment says your purpose is dead? That is the identity test. And Joseph passed it. He served faithfully in prison. He did not collapse into bitterness. He did not abandon his character. And when the moment of expansion came, it came in one day. One conversation with Pharaoh, and Joseph was ready because the structure was already built. The second man is David. David was anointed as king when he was still a shepherd boy. He was chosen, marked, set apart, and then he spent years running for his life from the existing king, Saul, who wanted him dead. He lived in caves. He led a band of desperate men. He had opportunities to take the throne by force. He had Saul in his hands on 2 occasions. He could have ended it. Most men would have ended it, but David refused, not because he was passive, but because David understood something deep. He understood that the throne given to him by God could not be taken by him through manipulation, because how you obtain something determines whether you can keep it. A throne taken by manipulation will eventually destroy the man sitting on it. And in those years in the wilderness, God was not wasting David's time. God was testing David's stewardship, not his stewardship of a kingdom, because David did not have a kingdom yet, but his stewardship of the men around him, the resources he had, the authority he had been given over his small group, the opportunities that came his way. Was David a man who could govern what was in his hands? Because a man who cannot govern small things will be destroyed by large things. Every man who has ever been given responsibility over much started with responsibility over little. And what you did with little is exactly what God is using to determine whether you are ready for more. The third man is Solomon. Solomon is the man who received expansion at a level that almost no other man in history has experienced. Wealth, wisdom, influence, resources. His life was a picture of what expansion looks like when a man is structurally ready. But we often forget what happened before Solomon built the temple, before he carried the weight of an entire kingdom. He was tested for capacity. Could he handle the volume of responsibility, decision-making, leadership, and pressure that governing a kingdom required? And Solomon, at the beginning, did something wise. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for power. He asked for wisdom. He asked for the capacity to carry the weight. Because Solomon understood, at least in the beginning, that expansion without the internal capacity to carry it would crush him. That is the lesson. The men who survive at expansion are the men who build capacity before expansion arrives. Now let's talk about the 3 tests directly, because this is what you came for, and I want you to sit with each one and let it land. Test number 1 is the identity test. Before God expands your life, He will test your identity. And I do not mean your name or your title or your role. I mean the deep knowledge of who you are, what you are called to, what you will not compromise on, and what you stand for when nothing around you is confirming it. Here is why identity is the first test, because expansion will attack your identity before it rewards it. When you step into a larger arena, you will face louder voices, more criticism, more pressure to become something you are not, more invitations to dilute who you are in order to gain access to what you want. A man who does not know who he is will say yes to those invitations, and in the process, he will lose himself while gaining the thing he thought he wanted. But a man who is rooted in identity, who knows his values, knows his calling, knows the non-negotiables of his character, that man can walk into the larger arena without being swallowed by it. Identity is not arrogance. Identity is architecture. It is the internal structure that holds everything else up. Without it, nothing else you build will stand. This is why the first volume in the Foundation Bundle is called Identity of Kings, because before a man can govern anything outside of himself, he must first have a settled, clear, unshakable sense of who he is inside. Identity of Kings walks you through the process of establishing that internal architecture, not through therapy language, not through motivational frameworks, through the structural wisdom of what it means to be a man who is built to lead, to carry, and to govern. If you do not know who you are, every test that comes after will shake you to your core, because you will have no foundation to stand on. Test number 2 is the stewardship test. After God establishes your identity, He turns His attention to what you are doing with what you already have. And this is the test where most men quietly fail, not because they are evil, but because they are careless with what they already have. Not in a cruel way, but in an honest way, because God is not going to give you more to mismanage. He is not going to expand your resources when you are not governing your current resources. He is not going to expand your time when you are wasting the time you already have. He is not going to trust you with larger opportunity when you are not treating your current opportunity with seriousness and intentionality. This is the test most men fail. Not because they are lazy, but because they are unfocused. They are reactive instead of deliberate. They are spending their time on things that feel urgent but are not important. They are spending their money in ways that feel good now, but build nothing for later. They are treating opportunity like entertainment instead of like seed. And here is the core principle of this test. Wealth is not an amount. Wealth is a seed. Everything you have right now, your time, your money, your relationships, your skills, your reputation, everything is seed. And the question God is asking is, what are you planting? Where are you sowing? Are you treating what you have like a seed that needs to be cultivated, protected, and invested? Or are you consuming it like it is the harvest? The man who treats what he has like seed will always have more to work with. The man who treats what he has like a harvest will always run out. This is why the second volume is called Wealth is a Seed, because until a man understands that everything he currently possesses is seed and not harvest, he will never steward it correctly. And God will not expand what a man is not stewarding. He will not water a field that the farmer has abandoned. He will not add resources to a man who is not being deliberate with the resources he already holds. Stewardship is not just about money. It is about how you govern every domain of your life. Your time is a stewardship question. How you manage your mornings, your evenings, your focused hours, that is stewardship. Your relationships are a stewardship question. Are you investing in the people around you or consuming them? Your health is a stewardship question. Are you maintaining the body that God has given you to carry out your purpose? Every single domain of your life is a test of stewardship. And when God sees a man who governs all of it with intentionality and order, that is when the next door begins to open. Now, here is the bridge that connects all three tests. And I want you to follow this carefully because this is where everything comes together. First comes identity. A man must know who he is. That is why the first volume is Identity of Kings. You cannot build anything stable without knowing who is doing the building. Then comes seed. A man must learn to steward what he has. That is why the second volume is Wealth is a Seed. Because the way you treat what is in your hands determines what God places in your hands next. But here is what happens when identity is established and stewardship is functioning. Life begins to expand. Things begin to grow. Doors begin to open. Responsibility begins to increase. And this is the most dangerous moment for a man, because expansion without structural reinforcement is just a more impressive collapse. The pressure of expansion will test everything. It will test your relationships. It will test your decisions. It will test your ability to lead underweight. And if a man's structure is not strengthened before expansion arrives, the expansion itself becomes the instrument of his destruction. That is why there is a third test. Now here is the moment that destroys a lot of men. Because once identity is stable and stewardship starts working, life begins to expand. Doors open, money increases, responsibility multiplies, and suddenly the weight of life is much heavier than it was before. That is where the third test appears. Test number 3 is the capacity test. Capacity is the internal ability to carry the weight of expansion without breaking. It is not a fixed thing. It can be built, it can be developed, but it must be developed before the weight arrives, not during the collapse. Here is what capacity looks like in real terms. A man with capacity can hold pressure without making rash decisions. He can lead people without losing his own direction. He can absorb criticism without abandoning his identity. He can carry long seasons of hard work without burning out or giving up. He can set boundaries that protect the mission even when people around him do not understand those boundaries. He can say no to good things in order to protect the great thing he is building. That is capacity. And most men have never been taught how to build it. They have been taught to push harder, work longer, sacrifice more. But capacity is not just about effort, it is about structure. It is about knowing your identity deeply enough that pressure cannot reshape you. It is about having your internal life so ordered that external chaos cannot collapse you. It is about understanding your limits, building your boundaries, strengthening your margins, and expanding your ability to carry weight gradually and deliberately. This is why the third volume is called Expansion Without Collapse. Because the goal is not just to expand. The goal is to expand in a way that does not cost you everything you have already built. There are men who gained everything they prayed for and lost their health, their marriage, their peace of mind, and their sense of self in the process. That is not expansion. That is a different kind of destruction that happens to look like success from the outside. Now I want to tell you about a tool that I have made available for free. It is called the Vessel Inspection Protocol. Before a man pursues expansion, before he opens the next door or steps into the next level, he must inspect his own structure. Just like an engineer inspects a building before adding weight, a man must honestly assess the current state of his identity, his stewardship, and his capacity. The Vessel Inspection Protocol is a structured framework that helps you do exactly that. It asks the right questions. It reveals the weak points. It shows you where you are ready and where you need to strengthen. And it is free. The link is in the description below. Get it. Use it. Be honest with yourself when you go through it. Because the man who can honestly see his own weaknesses is the man who can actually address them. The man who pretends his structure is ready when it is not is the man who collapses under the weight of the blessing he prayed for. For the men who are ready to go deeper, I want to introduce the Foundation Bundle. This is volumes 1, 2, and 3 together. Identity of Kings, Wealth is a Seed, and Expansion Without Collapse. These 3 volumes form the complete architecture of expansion. Together they address every layer of what God tests before he expands a man's life. They are not motivational content. They are structural frameworks, practical tools, architectural blueprints for building the life you are called to carry. The Foundation Bundle is available at $97, and it is the most direct investment you can make in the structural readiness of your life. The link is in the description. If you are serious about being ready when the door opens, this is how you prepare. Let me close with this. Every man who has ever been used to carry something significant went through a season of testing that looked like delay. Every man who has ever governed something of consequence was first proven in something smaller. Every man who has ever expanded into his calling first had to be built in the waiting. God does not withhold expansion from men he loves. He prepares the man for the expansion he has already planned. The 3 tests are not obstacles. They are the preparation. Identity is not a concept. It is a foundation. Stewardship is not a religious word. It is a governing principle. Capacity is not a luxury. It is a structural requirement. And the man who passes these tests is not the man who had no pressure. He is the man who was built under the pressure. He is the man who knew who he was when everything tried to tell him otherwise. He is the man who governed what was in his hands when no one was watching. He is the man who built his capacity quietly, consistently, and deliberately until the weight of expansion could no longer break him. That is who God is looking for. That is who you are becoming. Do not despise the season of preparation. Do not mistake the building phase for abandonment. The foundation is being laid. The structure is being tested. And when it is ready, the expansion will come. And you will be standing when it arrives. God is not preparing the expansion first. He is preparing the man who must carry it. Your soul is the blueprint. Your life is the construction. Shalom, my friend. Now let's build the life God designed for you.